Hello and welcome to Ahead of the Curve. I am Jonathan Gellner, and thank you so much for joining us today. Today we're joined by Tom Sutaris, minor league hitting coach for the Colorado Rockies. Tom has spent time coaching at every level. He was a high school English teacher and coach, a college coach, and is now the AA hitting coach for the Colorado Rockies. On the show, Tom shares with us some ways he has grown as a coach, especially getting to coach at every level. We talk about how to make changes with a player and how to ask questions to get to the root of the problem. And Tom dives deep into how to create a hitting culture. You're going to love this episode with Tom Sutaris. Tom, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
Definitely. And, a couple of months ago, I got to spend some time with you on Zoom, a lot of time, actually, probably more time than we were expecting, but I was lucky enough to have you join us. And so I know that you're going to bring some dynamite conversation. And so I'm really, really excited for the guests to get to learn about you today. But for them to kind of get an idea of your background, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in really the game of baseball and why you decided to get into coaching?
Yeah, absolutely, Jonathan. Well, like I said, I'm excited to be on here because obviously I've listened to your podcast for years, and actually to be on here is it's really exciting for me. So, um, basically, my background is, I've been a baseball rat since I was 5 years old. It's all I've ever wanted to do. I never went off. I never had any desire to get into another line of work to make a lot of money. Um, and obviously, that's what led me here today. So I was kind of that classic player. I was a pretty good player in high school, pretty good player in college, and played some independent ball. But I was probably the guy you looked at and said, "Hey, he's going to make a nice coach someday," because I think my heart was more than my talent. So basically, a couple things I want to share that I think are important for me is my why is why I'm here. Is I basically was in middle school, and I love baseball, and I was kind of a kid just kind of cruising along in eighth grade. I wasn't getting in trouble or anything, but I just really had no focus on anything. I was just kind of getting by and playing my sports and doing whatever. And I got to high school, and I had a coach named Ken Frank. And basically, Ken Frank was he could have been a character on The Sopranos. That's just kind of how he looked. He was intense. He held you to a standard, and playing for him, it gave me the opportunity to like really lock in on something, because if you didn't show up, he was going to let you know about it. And he was very intense, and we had a great program. We won a bunch of state championships over the years at that school, and to me, he made a difference in my life. He brought me in and gave me a purpose. He gave me an identity. He gave me something that I want to be. So I'm always forever thankful to him. Um, and that kind of led me down that path into baseball. And basically since then, I've never wanted to do anything else. I've always wanted to be on a ball field. Um, and so basically my background is I played high school ball in New Jersey. Like I said, Ken Frank was a soprano type of character. And from there, I was able to get a scholarship to the University of Tennessee. I went down there, and probably at that point they said, "Man, how do we get this guy? I don't think he's real raw. He doesn't know what he's doing yet." Um, and that led me to, they basically told me I wasn't gonna have much of a chance to play. But what I did have the opportunity to do at University of Tennessee was meet a gentleman named Mike Barnett, where Ken Frank gave me the opportunity to love the game of baseball and love the intensity and love a focus and a purpose. Mike Barnett taught me a lot about player development. And I'll never forget this. And I have to share this story because I'd be remiss if I had this interview and didn't mention it, because to me, it was so crucial in my development and identifies, the role of a coach. And what he did was, it was the first time I'd ever seen video, because I'm old, and I got to see some video of myself. And in that video, I was basically, my head was over my front knee when he stopped the video. My arms were extended away from my body. And I was probably in the worst possible position you could ever be to hit a baseball. And it was kind of funny because I was swinging the bat pretty well at that time, and SEC, who getting some good pitchers. And I looked at the video, and I could see guys in the room looking at each other like saying, "Wow, look at this." And Mike Barnett looked at me, and might have been some coach talk at the time, but he looked at me and said, "Tom," he goes, "look at that position you're in right there." He goes, "And think about how well you're hitting the ball. Imagine how good you're going to be when we get you into the right position." And from that day, I was hooked. And whatever Mike Barnett said, I was in on. And I think that's what we have to realize as coaches, the impact that we have. Um, And I think it's just crucial for understanding that every word we say to a guy actually matters. So I just wanted to touch on those two guys, and that's my why, and that's why I'm here. But essentially, as I told you, I started New Jersey high school, went to Tennessee. I transferred out of there, went to a great junior college in New Jersey called Brookdale Community College, and finally I transferred down to Lynn University, a small NAIA school down in South Florida. Uh, from that opportunity, I was able to sign and play independent ball. I blew out my knee my junior year, and I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but I ended up not getting drafted, and might have something to do with my limited talent as well. But I ended up in indie ball and had a nice run there. Played 3 years of independent ball. But while I was doing the independent ball, I was able to serve as a coach at a school called Northwood University in West Palm Beach, Florida, and it's now called Kaiser University. But I had the opportunity to start coaching there. At that point, I kind of felt I had a teaching degree. I felt like I actually did want to make more than $12,000 a year. So I moved up to New Jersey and I returned to coach at my old high school. Coach Frank gave me a great opportunity there. I was then able to start a brand new program at Barnegat High School, and I took that over for 5 years. Well, about that point, my wife, who's been really supportive of my career, her mother had a stroke, and my wife is a native Texan, and she wanted to get back close to her mother down in San Antonio, Texas. So she said, I want to move back to Texas, be close to my mother. I said, if I can get back in the college game, I'm in. I said, because I had forgotten, I'd gotten away in New Jersey. I have 3 months to work with players, and I missed the player development portion of it, where you had a chance to sit down in a cage and work with a kid and really slow things down. I was able to go down there. I picked up at a Division II school. I helped out there, which I started working Texas baseball camps in Summer University of Texas, and I eventually was able to get a full time position at the University of Texas. I was in a operations role, and from there, I left my last year right to go to the University of Incarnate Word and help Pat Hallmark get that program going. And about that time, I'd gotten the opportunity with the Rockies. I got a call, and the interview went well, and I was able to pick up there. And I'm now in my third year with the Rockies, and unfortunately, we're not on the ball field right now.
So Tom, one thing that I think that you bring that is a little bit unique is you've literally coached at every level, which I think is absolutely fantastic. So you've been in the high school realm, you've coached in small school college, you've coached in Division 1, and now you're in AA with the Rockies. And so I just tell us a little bit about how you think each of those levels has made you a better coach. Like, what are some different just takeaways that we can hear from you that we can take and just make our own and learn from your experiences at each level? But just what are some different things that you've learned along the way at each step?
Honestly, I would tell you one of the big things I learned was when I first started coaching, I was probably over the top intense. And as I started to coach younger kids, and that kind of came from my high school experience, where we were very intense about things. It's a very disciplined program. And over the time, I've kind of evolved, because as you start coaching younger kids, you start to realize if you're intense, they're going to go into a shell. And over the years, I think that understanding that each level, you go down, you have to understand that their confidence level, it gets lower and lower at every level they go down. So I think it's allowed me to learn more patience as I've gone through. And I think right now, as it relates to our guys, I'm really, really patient, and I'm really a much better listener than I used to be. So I think every level you go to, there's a different and unique experience. Um, and it's funny, the professional guys, like you can get away with something to a high school kid that maybe you realize later, like maybe that didn't make as much sense as I thought it did. If you say something like that to a professional guy, they're going to recognize it right away, and you're going to lose some credibility. So I think I've learned to be much more careful with my words and much more sure of what I'm saying before I express a thought.
Again, I just love hearing how people are growing, because I think if you can nail that and you can understand how you're growing, then then obviously you're not stuck with where you're at. And I, again, knowing you personally, I know that you're not. And I think that's something that if you look back and you don't shake your head at some of the different things that you did, then you probably haven't grown a ton. And I know that I've got 10 years of good and some shaking my head experiences and the different things that I do. and then I'll probably have some in the next 10 years, which again, with growth that happens. We're just trying to fill a little bit less than we did yesterday. But really, another thing that is interesting that you get to do is you get to work with a lot of well refined players. So as you mentioned earlier, you are in Double A, which they're a step away from the big leagues, and they're fairly mature. Probably early to mid 20s players, and obviously all dependent. But what are some different ways that you are an advocate for them? So again, they've gotten to that level without you for the most part. And so you're wanting to help them, and you're wanting to guide them, and to give them the information that they want and the help that they need. But it's also a trust building exercise, because again, they don't know you really that well until maybe spring training or the off season before. So what are some different ways that you go about really helping to gain trust with players, to get to know them, and just some different advice along that realm?
No, that's definitely a great point. And one of the expressions I heard years ago that has always resonated with me is, before you show them how much you know, you have to show them how much you care. And I think by having genuine conversations, finding out about our players personally, like, hey, where you've been, how's your family, what do you have for what siblings? We like to do a lot of that, and kind of dive into the person first before I show them anything about his swing. Um, yeah, they want to know that you care about them. And obviously, I think being an advocate for them and asking them questions, and getting their input before we make any changes is so crucial. It's such a crucial part of the development, because that's where the trust starts. Um, Kind of funny. So, a funny story, I had a guy's a big leaguer. He was a minor leaguer at the time. And the first time I ever walked in a cage in affiliated baseball with the Rockies, I went in, a guy was hitting off the tee, and I started setting some balls on the tee. Now, it's my first time out there. My adrenaline's going. And the guy takes literally 5 swings, and he turns to me and goes, "What do you think?" And I turned to him. I said, "I don't think anything yet. I've seen you take 5 swings off a tee. I have nothing for you yet. I just want to keep watching and observing." And he shook his head. He ended up telling me about a week later that he was testing me, because he's had a coach experiences where somebody tries to give him information right away, and they start trying to change his swing to show how much they know. And he was basically testing to see if I was going to be one of those guys. So it's really interesting. Literally 1 minute into my Rockies experience, I learned a valuable lesson like that, to
I love
listen
that.
before I start making suggestions. And for me, it was a great test and a great learning experience.
No, I love that story. And again, thank you for sharing that with us, because man, it gives me nightmares thinking about some of the things that I did whenever I was, younger. And again, we're probably all going to go through this at some point in our career, to where we look back and go, "Dang, that was stupid." And I was the opposite of that. My first couple of years of coaching is I would want to jump right in and help, because again, out of a servant, mindset of wanting to help them to get better, I would notice things. And now it's taken to the point to where it's like, okay, I need to check all of these different boxes before I think a certain thing, because we all have biases. And so I love hearing that story for you, and I love getting to hear that, especially with the player, because that's really cool that he was testing you. Because if you what would have happened, do you think, if you had started to critique his swing? What do you think he would have said?
I honestly think he would have shut me down, and basically tuned me out completely at that point. Yeah, I'm sure he wouldn't have been rude, but he would have probably just said, "Okay, this guy's out with me." So, kind of interesting. So, over the course of spring training, like I said, he was on the cusp of the big leagues at the time. I would feed him from time to time, because we end up talking a little bit that day. And later on, I asked him a question about why he, you know, hit off the tee a certain way he did, why he did that move. And he goes, "Well," and eventually he asked me why. And I said, "Because I think, I basically gave my opinion on what I thought would be a better plan of action for him." And he's like, "I like that." And he actually changed that and implemented it into his routine, which I was like, "Wow, that's awesome." Then the next year he came in, he was working on that same thing we talked about. And I thought it was really neat that, you know, if I hadn't established that trust, it would have been, it never would have happened. So I thought, for me, it was really exciting.
Oh, that is really cool. And
Obviously, it's never about me, but
sh-
for me personally, it was exciting.
Sure, no, and that's something that I think we can all learn is picking our spots, and we can go with cliches all day, I'm sure, and for the most part, a lot of cliches are true, and like you said earlier, you talked about them getting to know how much you care before really stepping in and doing some different things, and then I think that the teacher will show up when the student is ready is another cliche you could say that is so true. And I really like that, and it's something that I think we all have to go through that growth, and we have to go through just understanding that. But that's something that again with this podcast now over 200 episodes, there's been so many times that has been referenced that you start to listen, I hope, and I know I have, and that's something that I have definitely changed since the first days of coaching too. But let's go ahead and let's talk about evaluating a new player. You mentioned that you were watching this player, player Z on a tee, and you were evaluating him just on the inside without having to tell him, and then trying to decide what was important, what wasn't, what was his style versus what's going to help him get better. And so, what are some different things that you look for whenever you are evaluating a new player? Because I think you mentioned earlier that you were doing some different personal training. And so, I'm assuming that you do some different lessons with younger guys. And again, you've worked from high school to small college to Division I to now AA with the Rockies. And so, you've gotten to see so many different players along the way. What are some of your things that you look for whenever you are evaluating a new player and then they do come to you asking for help?
Well, obviously, the first part of the equation is I am obviously when I'm watching them, I'm watching mechanically. I always start when I look mechanically, I always start with the lower half because I think if that's not, if it's not starting correctly down there, it's all going to go up the kinetic chain. So basically, I look there and then I start to work my way up the body. But obviously, when I'm evaluating that player, I think a lot of times the mechanical stuff um, comes from things that are going on between the ears. So I do have to ask them questions. And I know, I'm probably going to dive into this a lot because to me, the relationship is so crucial if we want to be great coaches, is asking the questions of why they're doing certain things. How does he perceive himself? We've all had that middle infielder that's been told his entire life, hey, just play defense. I don't care what you do on offense. And now you get that guy in pro ball and he comes to you and he doesn't think he's a good hitter. He's thinking, hey, I just got to move runners. I just got to, hang in there and handle the bat. And they give all these cliches when I want this kid to realize he has great eye-hand coordination. He's athletic. He's quick. He could be a great offensive player. And if you don't dive into the mind and figure out how he perceives himself, is he a yes man who's never going to tell you anything? I think all of those things. We may be wanting to dive into mechanics here with this question, Jonathan, but I think really understanding what goes on between the ears, what his approach is, what his thought process is kind of where I always have to go first. Obviously, from a mechanical point, I'm going to look at that lower half and work up the chain. I like to work at where he is when his front heel hits the ground. That's one of the big ones for me. Does he have rhythm? Does he control his forward move? And does he have space? Does he have timing? All of those things are going to come into play, but I want to understand what his mindset is, because if he's thinking I'm trying to slap the ball the other way and not drive the ball in the gaps, that's going to affect his move mechanically. So to me, there's so many things we have to look at. But I definitely want to get in between the ears to find out what's going on.
No, I love that, and I think you nailed that. Yeah, yes, it may be a mechanical question, but I also w- we know the what. Like we've seen almost every single drill that's out there, and you could easily find that stuff on YouTube. But I think that really good coaches such as yourself, you understand the why and the how behind it. So let's just go over a situation. So let's say that I come to you and I'm like, Tom, dude, I'm the guy you just described, the light hitting infielder.
Mm-hmm.
And so you would literally just ask them, say, hey, why do you do this? And just have them answer it for you.
Absolutely, yeah, and the conversation to me happened organically. It always starts with, hey, what are you feeling on that swing right there when maybe he hits one really well, and then maybe he doesn't hit one really well. Did anything feel different on that? And I always emphasize, don't just tell me what I want to hear, because we get a lot of guys that come in and you know what I call yes man. He's just going to tell you what you want to hear. For me, I emphasize that it has to be honest feedback. Don't tell me what I want to hear. If I say, hey, did that feel good? Or how did that feel? And I'm excited about it. Don't give me the answer that I want to hear. I need the truth from you. So yeah, I want to know what is going in your mind, what you're trying to do, what you were hunting, all these things tie together. And kind of the things to me are the mental game. What, are you feeling the stress of what's going on around you in certain situations? So I love to coach the mental game, and we have a great mental skills coordinator, Doug Chadwick, and he has a great group with him, but they're not with us every day. So we have to take hold of some of that mental game. What's his approach? What's he trying to do against this guy? This lefty that's soft tossing lefty. What was his approach? What was he trying to do? Obviously, we dive into the mechanics, and then if I do find something that where we see a mechanical move, everything's going right between the ears, but he's mechanically there's a deficiency or an inefficient movement. Then what I like to do is think about what can make that move better. Before I go in and tell this kid he has something going on with a swing, I want to think about what drill can we do that can help fix this move and help make this a more efficient move. Because sometimes rather than diving right into the mechanics, what I like to do is, and this is where the trust factor comes in, say, hey, let's try this drill. Can I try this one with you? And most of the time, if there's a trusting relationship, I say, yeah, I'll give it a try. I'm like, I just want to see something. And what that might do is that might create a more efficient move mechanically for him, and he doesn't even realize why he's doing it. With our guys at our level, I think afterwards we have to share with them, hey, I did that drill because I feel like you were getting disconnected early there, and I know you could feel that move. We talked about it yesterday, and now with this drill, I feel like you looked more connected when that drill happened. And obviously, we get some blast and we get some sensors and see if that works. But I like to find drills that help the move, so then we can explain why we're doing that drill. And if he understands the why, and why we're doing it, a lot of times they buy in on that drill. And now we haven't gotten into his head and gotten a paralysis by analysis, because he's not thinking about the mechanical move. He's thinking about executing that drill with an external focus. So
That was great information. And I love that. So here's the 3-step process that I wrote down. And I really like this because I think that this is really important for learning. You asked why, so they got to share their experience. Then you said, hey, would you want to try that? So now they're trying to own the experience. And now you ask the recap and tell them what you saw, probably ask how they felt. And now you're recapping the experience. So you're not only just telling them to do a drill to whether or not they buy in or not, you're actually getting pretty deep with that situation. And I just want to, commend you on that, because I think that that's really good. And so let's talk about a player who is struggling a little bit. And again, this is kind of alludes back to the point that you just made. But let's say that you have a player, you've been working with him for a little while. Let's say he's a minor leaguer again, so he hasn't come to you necessarily, but you are you are the hitting coach. And so let's say that you see a problem and he may not. Does that make sense? So you see a change that he probably needs to make. This is over several weeks and you've done all of your homework on this. What does that conversation look like whenever you want a player who, again, doesn't come to you, but you may approach him? You already have built a relationship, but you may want to you want to suggest a change for him. What does that conversation look like?
good. Well, first of all, I think if it's a change that I want and he doesn't want, that's going to have to be a drastic situation, first of all, because if it's coming strictly from me and he doesn't have ownership of it, it's generally not going to work, even if it's the right decision for him. So in those situations, it's basically, you got to do this, or you're not going to make it, and I haven't, honestly, in pro ball, I haven't been in that situation yet. I've had to make some changes, but nothing drastic to that extent where he didn't take ownership of it, because I think without his ownership, that move is generally it's going to really have a tough time, because as soon as he has a bad day, which is going to happen in pro baseball, he's going to go back to what he knows best, and there's going to be no trusting the process on that move. So if we do a suggestion and there's something that needs to be changed, and I know it has to change, and he's not quite bought in yet, honestly, I have to sell him on it. And I think the best way to sell him on that move is to show data. For example, if you have a kid who has a chase rate that's off the charts. He just chases a ton, and he's had success. He's hit at every level. He's hit for power, and he's in low A ball. And man, all these numbers add up. Fans look at all the numbers that you see, and everything he does is right. But he has 4 walks and he has 122 strikeouts. At some point in time, that is going to catch up to him. So one of the best ways for a guy like that to learn is show him how many guys in the big leagues had those splits when they were in A ball, and there will be none of them, because those guys generally, that's they're some of the key components that don't allow you to make that switch. So in that example, you show him that these guys didn't make it. Hey, this guy did this, but then he never made it because pitchers at the higher levels exposed him. So I think showing data is really crucial. Another way is you look at, somebody who has a high swing and miss rate in the zone, or, we did the chase rate, but a high swing or miss rate in the zone. How many of those guys make it to the next level? We could show guys these were his numbers. So I think really data is one of the best teaching points, because players, if you give them hard data versus opinions, they're more likely to buy in. If they're skeptical at that point, I think hard data is some of the best way for that to happen. One of the other good ways is showing video. If he has a move that doesn't work, stop the video at the same point for him and 5 other big leaguers and say, look, this guy doesn't get here, this guy doesn't get here. No, every guy's different. You might say, well, I can get there. You might get there in A ball, but are you going to get there in the majors? And that's our ultimate goal, is to develop major leaguers, not develop good A ball players. Obviously, that's part of it, but our goal is to create big leaguers, and we have to allow them to see a vision. If we don't have a vision for them of what they're trying to get to, then, I don't know what we're doing here. Our goal is to develop big leaguers, and we have to create that vision for them that maybe they can't see at 20 years old.
No, fantastic answer. You've mentioned the mental game several different times, and that's really an all-encompassing word on a lot of different facets. But you talked off the mic, and we were texting earlier this week about that's part of your favorite game to teach. So kind of dive into that a little bit for us, and give us how you do it, what you do, what your favorite part is. Let's just dive deep right into it.
Well, let me first off tell you that I am a lefty, and my mind definitely works differently than a lot of people. So I do some stuff probably that other people look at me and think it's a little bit different. And I'm okay with that. I embrace that. Essentially, what I try to do is create a culture. And I think when you create a hitting culture, and that's why I talked about getting in between the ears of that middle infielder who doesn't think he could hit, or that catcher who's, just say, keep playing defense, and whatever you give us offensively is a bonus, that kind of stuff. If your mindset is like that, you're never going to exceed expectations. To me, one of my biggest jobs as a hitting coach is to make hitters believe that they're better than they are. Now, that doesn't mean I blow smoke and just tell things that aren't true. I can be honest with them, but I want them to think they're better than they are, because if they do everything and they continue to improve, they could be that guy. I don't give an unrealistic vision. I don't tell our 140-pound leadoff guy that he could hit 30 home runs. That's unrealistic. But what I want him to do is believe that he is better than he is. And to me, you have to create a culture. We create a culture with our team where basically one of the things, so here's a good learning lesson I had my first year in California. Lancaster, California, where I was the last 2 years, gets really cold in April and May at night because it's a windy city. Okay. And that's really well known in baseball that it's windy there. Well, I'll tell you what, we got there. It was colder than some of the games I played in New Jersey growing up. A lot of those nights in Lancaster. So a couple times early, we got out there and our guys got out there, and you could tell they were cold. And I don't think we performed as well as we should have, because I think the cold impacted us. So what I like to do is create a culture of saying, I learned this from Doug Chadwick, and I also learned this from Ken Revisa when he was at Texas, was basically whatever happens, good. The umpire's got a big zone tonight, good. It's 30 degrees outside and windy, good. we had a long commuter trip today. Good. And we looked at a point where we started embracing all the things that are really challenging about pro baseball, because pro baseball, people tell you it's a grind, but I'll tell you what, when you are out on that road for minors, 140 games, majors, 162 plus playoffs, it is an absolute grind. So having the right mindset and not accepting, oh, I'm tired today, we had a long trip, so we're going to be flat today. That is not acceptable. And creating that culture, I think, is so important. The other aspect that I think is crucial is eliminating that fear of failure. Pro baseball players are going to fail. It doesn't matter if they sign for $5 million and they're the number 3 prospect in baseball. They are going to have a lot of tough days. It's just the nature of the game. And eliminating that fear of failure is so hard. I mean, that's like, and we talked earlier about the levels that you coach at. Those kids in high school are terrified to fail. Kids in college are terrified to fail. But each level you go up, I think it gets a little bit less. The less fear of failure you have, and the more you play the game free and without worried about making a mistake, it's amazing what you can accomplish. So I love to create that culture, and I just believe in positivity. I'm going to dive into that. Positivity is such a it really makes a difference. I mean, we get out there certain days, and even as coaches, you feel your body's like, man, if my body feels like this, I imagine what their body feels like. They're actually playing the game. But if you go out there with an energy that next day and you're tired, you can't let the kids see that. And I don't let the kids come in. If they come in the cage, I'll tell them, hey, get your energy, get rolled out, do whatever you got to do, but we got to come in here. It's time to work. And I'm pretty positive. Like, we have to make that positive energy there, and we have to make sure their minds are right every single day. And I don't think we could take days off as coaches where we come in and go through the motions. It has to be an everyday thing.
No, I really, really like that. And again, thank you for diving into that. And so let's just talk a little bit about that, and let's talk about a player who, let's say we're in the middle of the season, and let's say that player X is struggling, and I know that let's just say at the plate, and I know that that's kind of an open question, but
Mm-hmm.
what's your process in helping that player to be positive and believe in themselves? Because let's say that it's me and I'm 0 for 25 with like 15 punch outs, and I'm just like,
Mm-hmm.
Tom, I can't see the ball, like it looks like it's a BB right now. And so I again, there's so many different things that you could go into, as far as you probably have an eye on that anyways, but
Mm-hmm.
just for the sake of the podcast, what's your process in deciding how to help that player that's struggling during the season?
Well, number one thing, when a guy's struggling and everyone around him knows he's struggling, I think one of the most important things is to get him alone. Whether you shoot him a text message at night and tell him you have an idea, you think you have something that's going to help him, but if you get him to buy into that um, mindset that, hey, we got something for you. Now maybe they come to the park optimistic that next day. Sometimes I'll go grab lunch with them. Hey, let's go grab some lunch and talk a little bit. To me, getting that kid alone is really crucial, because now he might share his insecurities with you. He might share what he's feeling a little bit more. But if you just have him in a normal cage environment, he's less apt to share that. So what we like to do is we'll get some early work. If we think it's something that could be done on the field, we'll get him out there by himself doing early work, which is part of my normal day. We usually have early work, but I might say, hey, just you, let's go out tomorrow. Let's spend some time and feel what we need to feel. I think sometimes if we can get that part of it, I think it's important. Obviously, you talked about a real stretch. The other challenge, I think, with that whole situation is the kid who is 0 for his last 10, and he's feeling pressure for whatever reason, whether he's not playing as much, whether he's a prospect and thinks he's letting the organization down, whatever his situation is recognizing that even though he's 0 for his last 10, and I think he looks great, he knows he's 0 for 10. So I think being cognizant of that struggle that he's dealing with is crucial. And recognize that before he gets in the cage. So when he's like, like he looks different, you can see in his eyes, you're like, what's going on? I have to know that ahead of time. But that guy who's struggling, I think just getting him alone and reminding him how good he is. I don't care how long these guys have been playing. I don't care how successful they are. At every point in time, every player we have has self-doubt. and reminding these kids how good they are is crucial. And if you have to get them alone to remind them how good they are and have that quiet conversation in a non-threatening environment, I think that's essential for him coming out of those struggles. The other thing is emphasizing the process over the results. So if you have a kid who is struggling lately and he's swinging at everything under sun, let's evaluate tonight on whether you swing at the right pitches, because I know if you swing at the right pitches, you're going to be okay. And maybe going about a different way of evaluating his success as opposed to just did I get hits, because probably in your 0 for 25 you probably had a night where you hit 3-line drives and they were all at somebody. So that's the part of it that I think kids lose perspective on. And we talk about it all the time. We can't chase hits. We got to understand the process, got to understand there's going to be ups and downs. But if we stay in that process, we have a chance to be successful.
No, that's so good. And again, it's for in a lot of different ways, especially during the middle of the season. Some different mechanical changes can happen, but for the most part, it's we're reverting to we're not as good as we think we are. And like you said, anyone who's listening who has a heart, which is everyone, we all have self doubt in different areas, and that's something that the older that I get, the more that I realize, because again, we all have this imposter syndrome, or we think that we may not be as good as other people, but we also look at other people's highlights and we remember our own low lights more than anything else, because we know ourselves even though somebody else may not know us as well. So that's so good, and I like that you reference the 0 for 10 guy too, and to just don't freak out, man. It's okay, and I like that. That's really really good. So let's talk about what an in game and dugout conversation would look like then. And let's say that you've got basically Max Scherzer on the mound, and he's dealing, and you've got some different players that you're talking with through, and just what are some different things that you look for in a game? What are some different things what are some different words or conversations that you have, and how can we get better at that in dugout conversation to really adjust to what we're seeing without having to overhaul everything and freak everybody out? What's kind of the balance there, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Good. Well, real quick, I want to go back into the previous thing, and I'll go right back to that
Sure,
real quickly.
absolutely.
The one thing is when a guy's struggling, I like to send him video of when he's going good. We have a tendency as coaches to show him his bad video and what he's doing wrong, which is only going to, you know, amplify the problem. So basically, what I like to do is if a guy's really struggling, I send him video of all his good hits, and what that guy does, because he's feeling so lousy, he'll watch that thing. He'll watch that reel 5 times in a row. And Jeff Nelson, our video guy, does a great job of getting me stuff like that. And I'm like, can we send this? And then I'll share it with him. And watching that good video helps. So I think that's big. So the game planning aspect of things. One of the things I think when a game is going tough and you have, your Max Scherzer or whoever on the mound, somebody that's absolutely dominating you at that point, what I always try to emphasize to our guys, he is human. He's right now he's in his zone. All it takes is one pitch to change this entire game. And so what we do is we emphasize I'm playing one pitch at a time, and that's one of my big points of emphasis. Obviously, if there's a game plan, if he's we were spitting on a slider because he never throws for a strike, and he's thrown 15 for strikes already. Obviously, there might be some kind of change in our approach, but in terms of it, what we try to emphasize is that guys, at some point, he's going to have a bad inning. Nobody goes 9 innings and they're called perfect games where they don't make mistakes. So they're very rare. So minor league guys, we tell them he's gonna have a bad inning. We just have to stay in our process, trust our plan. And when we get that pitch and he hangs that one breaking ball, we hit a double. Now he gets in the stretch. The whole game can change. And it's funny, just kind of taking that approach of winning individual pitches and trying to break the game down. And I know it's cliche, and I know we say it all the time. And they actually, it's kind of one of the things they make fun of me at, because I'm like, win this pitch. Like, we emphasize it so often, because when that guy's going good, we say, hey, guys, if we can win an individual pitch, one individual pitch, we can change this game. So just win one pitch at a time. We emphasize it so much. I think we did a really good job, and I think we had like 20 something comebacks this year. I think a lot of it had to do with the mindset of the guys of that realizing his, 9 up, 9 down for the first 3 innings with, 5 punch outs he was going to come back to earth because he's still a pitcher in high A ball, and he's going to make mistakes no matter how talented he is.
There was a saying that I heard the other day that I thought was really, really good, and it's something again, when you do this podcast, or when I do this podcast, there are things that I say over and over and over again, and I think people are tired of hearing it. But one of the things that I heard the other day that it really resonated with me was, whenever you are finally getting tired of saying something, it's when people are starting to hear it or listen. And whether or not, we can debate hear or listen or whatever that means, but whenever they're finally starting to get it. And I thought that was so true as a coach, because, I think back to myself and past instances where I'm like, man, we went over this bunt defense like 17 different times. And if there's a difference between being bored with it, but also saying it over and over and over and over enough to reiterate how important it is. And so I think that that's really good with the win this pitch. He has an ERA, he's going to miss pitches, we just have to put in constant pressure. And I think that that's really, really good. But I did skip over the game planning, so let's back up a little bit to kind of the day of a game. What does that day look like for you as far as meetings go? I don't know how deep you can get into the game planning aspect of it, but it's something that I think is really, really, really important in the space that you are in, to be able to game plan well and to have those players to have confidence. Because again, we're facing Max Scherzer later tonight. What are some different things that you guys go over just to instill the confidence in them, and to make sure that they're ready to go, and they have enough information without giving them, too much information and then them freezing up?
Good. Now, to me, I obviously what I do is on the night after we finish our game before, I'll get video of the guy we're going to see the next night. I will send out his name, say, hey, we're seeing so and so tomorrow. This way, if they're one of those guys that want to sit at home, some of them might just want nothing to do with it and they need to decompress. That's fine, but I'll just send out in the text who's pitching. Some of them might look at the next morning, some of them might look at it that night. But then what I do is I try to dive into the numbers of basically what I see. And like I said, I'm not going to share all that information, but I do want to see, how he's trying to get guys out. And we get, this has been the neat thing about pro ball. We get so much information. So for me to learn, like, what is this guy trying to do? I could look at those and kind of tell you without even watching the guy how he's going to try to get you out, what his plan is. So I'll look at all that stuff the night before. I'll look at the video. I'll dive into his numbers, and then the next day, basically for me personally, I go in and get a workout in the morning. It's my one time a day that I really try to take care of myself a little bit. Then on the field, I'll look at some more video. I'll do all my prep work, all the paperwork I need to do in terms of batting groups, who's coming early. Obviously, the night before, I'll text him who has early hitting on the field. I'll offer voluntary, and guys will be letting me know, hey, I want to come in today, depending on how their body feels. Then basically, I'll do early work on the field for whoever needs it. That's always an option. If we are doing something like, for example, say I want everyone to do some curveball machine, and certain guys don't feel like they need they don't like to do the curveball machine for a game. I tell them everything before cage work is preparing for the big leagues. What they're doing after that, when they get to the cage, that could be preparing them for 7:05 that night. So I want to understand they have to develop to be a big leaguer, and they have to prepare to be great tonight. So we try to separate those two things. After I do the early work, I'll go to the cages, and guys will come in and we'll have different. Yeah, I was kind of loose with it last year, and guys had a system where they came in and they got their work in, and to me that's as crucial as anything else they do on that day. I don't like their first swings, obviously, being in batting practice. I want them to get some work in before. We have a staff meeting, then we kind of make some announcements to the team. It's batting practice. Then we have our hitters meeting. Um, and then they kind of get their dinner, and then it'll be the last swings before the game. The hitters meeting for me consists of, obviously we know what he throws. We'll share video. Video will be in the locker room all day. I'll have my iPad in there so they can look at it, and guys look at it separately at their own time when it works for them, and they do some visualization with it. But in that meeting, I share kind of basic information. I talk about some things that I see with the video. If there's some big trends that I see, I might address those, but I don't dive into too much detail And the reason I don't do that is because certain guys can handle more information, certain guys can handle less information. And it'd be silly of me to make a generalization with 12 different hitters whose mind work 12 different ways. So what I allow those conversations to do is happen organically over the course of the day. I'll see a guy say, "Hey, what do you got on this guy?" And we'll talk about it, and he'll give his opinion. Because as hitting coaches, we don't want to tell guys, "Hey, have a plan up there." We want to give an idea and steer them in the right direction of what is a good plan. As you told me, last week, be the bumpers for them to make sure that their plan makes actual sense. We don't want a guy looking for a guy with a nasty slider. It's almost unhittable to go up looking for that slider because it's a good one. No, we want to hit the pitch that we can actually handle as opposed to looking for the one that we can't handle. So we try to be the bumpers for him in that, but a lot of those conversations will happen organically. They'll happen, when we see as the game's developing in the fourth inning. We don't send our hitting coaches, do not go coach the bases. So I'll be on that top step, and guy will be in the hole, and we'll have a little brief conversation. Hey man, he's struggling right now throwing that breaking ball. So we could probably eliminate that pitch, and now we can hunt a fastball and expect a fastball because he's struggling with spin. So a lot of those conversations happen organically because, like I said, each guy handles information differently.
Oh, really, really good. And thank you for going into your routine. I think that that's something that it's so important for us as coaches to get into a good routine. And like you mentioned, one of the first things you do when you get up is to take care of your body, take care of your mind. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
that's so, so important and something that we neglect a lot of times. And I know that I'm putting that at the forefront of my day as well, just because I want to be better at the end of the day for our guys, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be so just hopped up on sugar that or energy drinks or whatever or pre-workout that we're just dead by the end of the day, and just setting our day up for success like that I think is really, really important. But let's go ahead and get into some lightning style questions, and just to get to
Okay.
know you a little bit better, again, I'm just going to take a step back, mute myself, and let you roll. But what's something that you've learned lately that's gotten you really excited?
Honestly, to me, we have one of the best. Trevor Swartz is our minor league, strength and conditioning coordinator, performance center, and he and I have been touching base a lot because I've always, looked, hey, they do their thing in there, and I do my thing in the cage, and I've kind of operated separately, not on purpose, not to try to push him away, but that's just, he did his thing, and I was so focused on my job. Well, I'm trying to find a good connection between how the body moves, what these guys do in the weight room, and how it connects to what I'm trying to do out here on the field. Sometimes we get in the cage and we think, hey, this guy's having a great year, and you feel good about what's been accomplished. Well, a lot of that happened because of the work they did in the weight room with Trevor and our strength staff, which are amazing. Mason and all the Phil, they're amazing guys that do great things. But I've been zooming with him and just trying to pick his brain every day. He's got so much on his plate, and I'm probably annoying him, but he's never turned me away, and he's always there to help. So I feel blessed to learn that part of the game a little bit better this off season.
Oh, that's great. What is a drill that your players love that we can steal from you?
I'll tell you what, one that really took off last year, and it's nothing cutting edge, but for me, and it probably helps because as I told you, my physical skills were a little limited. I don't have a great arm, so we do a lot of his overspeed short BP, especially right before the game. If they either do the machine or they do me throwing pretty much as hard as I can from like 20 feet away and just right on top of them. And what it forces them to do is kind of make sure their move is nice and tight and efficient because if not, even I can blow them up at that distance. And also make sure they're hunting the proper lanes as they take that BP because if they swing at the bad pitches I throw and they leave that lane, they're going to have a tough time and they're not going to like that field. So short BP, and I like to do from a little angle. If we're facing a righty that night, I'm off to the right side depending on how far off. If he's a lefty, I'm off to the left side. I'm a lefty thrower, but we could still simulate the angle of those pitches by moving the screen. But we like to do that over speed and short to get them ready to hit the best. You train like you fight. As the Navy SEALs say, you don't rise to the level of the occasion. You sink to the level of your training. So we want to train them to get ready to go face 95 that they're about to see, and 5 minutes or 15 minutes before the game before they stretch. So that's one of our favorite drills that we like to do.
Nice. I love that. What is one of your coaching pet peeves? And the reason that I ask this is because, we as coaches, we see other coaches doing X, Y, or Z, and we're like, man, I'm so glad that our staff doesn't do that, or thinking to yourself, I'm glad that I'm not that guy. So, what is something that you see other coaches doing, or maybe you did as a younger coach that you're like, ooh, that's probably not the best thing to do?
I think one of the biggest things is forgetting how hard this game is. Like bringing negativity and say, "Oh man, how do you swing at that pitch?" We've all swung at that pitch one time or another.
So good.
I think sometimes we get away from it. We forget how hard this game is, and I never ever want to forget how hard it is.
No, that's so true. What is something that you want your players to do, or just players that you coach to do, that may go unnoticed by a lot of people, but you think that it's important? And again, every week I give the example of whenever I was a high school coach coaching catchers, always shake the umpire's hand, introduce
Mhm.
yourself, and create that relationship. Is there anything that you do that's similar to that?
No, I think that example is like different than what I was thinking. Like I when I think about something I want that goes unnoticed, I was thinking from a baseball perspective. And what I think is be 100% invested with a clear mind on every pitch of every at bat in each game. So you might have a kid who plays defense for 140 pitches. He's a great shortstop, and he can be invested on every pitch. He's moving, he's reading things, and then we get 16 pitches in a game, and our mind goes in a million different directions, and we waste pitches in a game. That's one of my biggest pet peeves is when we just give away a pitch because we were frustrated about a previous call or we just didn't have a plan for that pitch. We went away from our plan. But if we can be 100% invested on every pitch of the game and every at bat in the game, I can evaluate that and look at that and say, good, I like that. We don't need a guy taking a thigh high fastball down the middle because he was for some reason looking for a breaking ball on the first pitch or not. You know what I mean? I want our guy, and if he has a good plan for it, I'm okay with it. But to me, being invested mentally and physically on every pitch is, I think, a big separator between being a big leaguer and a guy who doesn't make it.
You say that's a little bit different of a question, but I think that was much more impactful than, introducing yourself to the umpire, being invested every single pitch. I really like that, and it's something that's really hard to do, but again, it's something that is so important, and the best in the world do it.
Mhm.
Final question, as far as getting to learn about you, let's talk a little bit about your learning. If you could buy one book, or if you could enroll everyone in a course, or whatever that would be, all of the listeners, what would that be?
Absolutely. To me, I'm going to give you two. I hope you that's okay, but I'm going to do
Oh,
it.
please do.
The Energy Bus by Jon Gordon. If you read the Energy Bus and you can have a negative attitude the rest of the day, man, you're an amazing person because I don't know how you could possibly do that. There's so much negativity in this world right now, and when I feel negative thoughts, which aren't often because I'm pretty positive with that stuff, I read the Energy Bus. I think it is awesome. I mean, you don't even have to start anywhere. You just pick it up and start reading, and 15 minutes later, your mind should feel a lot better. The other book I think is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And it's funny, if you have a positive attitude and you have great habits, like you and I have talked about quite a bit off air, um, I don't know how you could have bad days. It's to me, 10% is what happens in life, and 90% is how you respond to it. So I think if you have a positive attitude and you have great habits to get where you want to be, it's really hard to have bad days.
Oh, I love it. And those are pretty easy reads too. Like you're
Very
not,
easy read.
your head's not going to hurt, and you're not going to have to look up a ton of different things. And I think that is really important whenever you are giving resources, especially not knowing what people are interested in. Those are two great resources. So thank you for sharing. But Tom, I appreciate your time, and I've loved getting to know you a little bit deeper. Obviously, we have different conversations, but I've loved getting to hear you share all of this information today. I will link your Twitter down in the show notes, and you can you explain Dirt's Sutaris for us a little bit?
I think part of being lacking some talent, I tried to make it up in other areas, and I enjoyed getting dirty. I enjoyed bleeding. I enjoyed ripping my pants. Like that kind of stuff was as much fun to me as anything. And I grew up, and whatever you think about him off the field, Pete Rose was somebody I watch play the game, and I wanted to play the game like that, and that kind of play just gets me going, and that's who I was. And somewhere along the line, I earned the nickname Dirt. So.
Oh, okay, cool. I love that. Well, I'm gonna mute myself and just kind of let you talk to our guests and just share anything that's on your mind. Just give them anything that you want to leave with them today, and the mic is yours.
Guys, I think the picture is a lot bigger than baseball. When we look out in our world right now, we see so much negativity, and the problem is that's people sitting at keyboards. Spread positivity, spread love. There's so many great people in this world doing so many great things for people, coaches especially. You guys sacrifice everything every day for people, but you know what? We don't make the news for that. Spread positivity, stay away from the negativity. You make a choice of what your attitude is, man, and try to bring positivity. Maybe we can overcome this negativity if we spread positivity and love as coaches.
Thank you for listening to Ahead of the Curve. You can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, which could include Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, Stitcher, or YouTube. And if you're enjoying the podcast, please share it on social media to help get the word out. Once again, thank you for joining us.